On Sunday, Sam Darnold will start at quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks in Super Bowl 60. Once upon a time, he was the hopeful franchise quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. Why did things not work out for Carolina and Sam? We'll revisit that relationship right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Super Bowl 60 going on in Santa Clara, California on Sunday. The Seattle Seahawks facing off against New England Patriots, and both quarterbacks have Charlotte ties. Of course, Drake May, the Charlotte native, Myers Park High School alum starting for New England. And on the other side, the former Panther starting quarterback, Sam Darnold, which it has been quite the journey for Sam, going from being third overall in the draft back in 2018, being selected by the Jets, to being traded here to Carolina, to being let go and going to San Francisco as a backup, to starting a year ago in Minnesota, helping them win 14 games and a division, to where they said, you know what, Sam, we like you, but we love J.J. McCarthy. And then he landed in Seattle, and I don't think a lot of us saw this one coming, as he helped them win 14 games this past year, win the number one seed in the NFC, and of course, win the Hallis Trophy as NFC champions, and now is on the doorstep of one of the great redemption stories in recent memory. When you look at a player who looked to be an absolute bust, and then here in year 8, could go on to help his team win a Super Bowl. And that's important. It's not like Sam has carried the Seahawks, but he has been a key cog, obviously, as their starting quarterback to getting them to this point. And I'm sure on Sunday, if Sam indeed is there at the site of one of Panther fans' greatest heartaches, losing Super Bowl 50, if he is there in Santa Clara, wearing that Seahawks uniform, hoisting up the Lombardi Trophy, and dare I say, the MVP trophy for the Super Bowl, there's going to be a lot of complicated emotions surrounding that. And I haven't really seen a ton of discussion surrounding the Panthers. I've seen plenty of people lambaste, and rightfully so, the New York Jets, who chose him out of USC, and how they got that wrong. But of course, Carolina, they invested in Sam. They thought that maybe he could be the right guy, and they moved on from him after his 2 seasons. So today, I wanted to look back at Sam Darnold's 2-year tenure here in Carolina and try to figure out why it didn't work. Now, we all lived through it, and there's certainly a lot of times is revisionist history. And I'm trying my hardest not to do that today, looking back at the numbers, looking back at some of the notes I had from that season. That was my first season hosting this show, Locked On Panthers. So I want to look at the 3 reasons, in my opinion, why it didn't work for Sam and why it did not work for the Panthers when he was here for those 2 seasons in Carolina. And reason number 1 for me is that the Panthers were a bad organization. My first episode of this show was talking about why it did not make sense for Carolina to trade for Sam Darnold. I did not think that he would be an upgrade over Teddy Bridgewater, who I understand in 2020 was given 8 different opportunities to either go win or tie the game, and he failed all 8 times. Now, it was not just Teddy. It was a Joe Brady problem. It was a Curtis Samuel problem, a Mike Davis problem, a overall offensive failure that season, to where they weren't able to execute in any of those situations. But I understood as well that Teddy was not the guy long-term, and David Tepper said as much after he mutually parted ways with Marty Hurney, saying that they need to be in constant pursuit of that franchise quarterback. We knew right then and there, all right, well, Teddy, you're a nice guy. Sure, you were fine last year, and you're not the answer, but you certainly are not going to be a starting quarterback in 2021. And that led Carolina down the path to Matthew Stafford, who fell in love in Cabo on vacation with Sean McVay, and that did not work out. And they decided on April 5th of 2021, screw it. Let's go trade for Sam Darnold. Let's give up a second, fourth, and sixth round pick for a quarterback the Jets very clearly were not going to keep around as their starter in 2021, as they had zeroed on BYU Zach Wilson as the second overall draft pick in that 2022 draft, or 2021 draft, rather. So the biggest selling point when you look back at that situation with Carolina bringing Sam here was that the Jets were a bad organization. That the Jets, they had fired Todd Bowles after Sam's first year. They had hired Adam Gase, and that introductory press conference, my God, you knew right then and there it wasn't going to work out. Like when you look at the former head coach out there in Arizona who was just fired recently, whose name is escaping me, when he's doing the whole Kendall Roy situation, if he's seen success, you know what I'm talking about. I'm like, yeah, Jonathan Gannon, it ain't going to work. Nick Sirianni didn't think it was going to work with him as well with his weird-ass press conference, and it has worked for Philadelphia, but we all knew. Day one of Adam Gase in New York, yeah, this guy doesn't have it. So it was a disaster from the beginning there for Sam, with Todd being fired, Gase coming in. Woody Johnson was cosplaying as the ambassador to the UK, and his little brother Chris was taking over as the acting owner. Just a complete dumpster fire of an organization the Jets were then and still are now here in 2026. So the thought was that compared to the Jets, the Panthers were a stable organization. They had Matt Rhule, who at that point in time, people were still looking at what he did at Temple and at Baylor, turning around two horrific situations. One, just historically one of the worst programs in FBS in Temple, and then another one, just disgusting things that Art Briles and Ian McCall and all the people involved allowed to happen there in Baylor. So he went there, had success, never won a conference championship. But if you understand college football, you would know, wow, he won at Temple, he won at Baylor. No one wins at Temple. No one wins at Baylor. And Matt Rhule won at both places. So he got the job here in Carolina, the meatballs. We all know the story of how he landed here. And the thought was, okay, Matt Rhule, yeah, he can be a good presence for Sam. Positive guy, comes from the college ranks. He'll identify with Sam Darnold. You also looked at Scott Fitterer. He was the guy, you looked at him, and he was a respected general manager. It was only his second year on the job. I think, well, actually, really was his first year on the job. But Scott was someone who had spent a ton of time under John Snyder in Seattle, had been a scout, so he knew how to evaluate players coming out of the college ranks and had a high opinion of Sam back when he was at USC. So that combination of Matt Rhule, Scott Fitterer made sense. And then David Tepper was still early into his ownership tenure in Carolina. So we figured, okay, Tep, billionaire, spent what, $2.25 billion liquid on the team. The guy is going to do great things for the Carolinas, going to do great things for the Panthers. So it felt like, compared again to the Jets, like a stable situation. But it wasn't. Because you look at it, coaching was clearly an issue. Matt Rhule, at the time, was viewed as someone who actually could succeed in the NFL. We later found out that he very much was not the guy. And maybe you felt like from the beginning, you felt like after 2020 that, yeah, this Rhule guy, he's not it. I wasn't feeling that way in 2021. And I'm guessing a lot of you, if you're willing to be honest, weren't feeling that way either. But we did find out at the end of the day that Matt Rhule, he ain't cut out for the NFL. And he doesn't appear to be cut out for this new age of college football either in Nebraska. But that's not our problem to deal with anymore. So, yeah, Matt Rhule, he turned out to be a disaster. The OC situation also was not great. Now, Joe Brady was the wonder boy offensive genius who helped orchestrate that 2019 offense at LSU, quarterbacked by Joe Burrow, with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson at wide receiver, potentially 3 Hall of Fame players on that offense. And look, Joe did do an outstanding chalk talk once upon a time in New Orleans that Ed Orgeron, the head coach of LSU that year, saw. He wanted Joe to come there, and Joe came in and helped them recreate the offense. If you followed LSU football at all back then, you knew every single year under Les Miles, and then when it was Ed Orgeron, they talked about how they were going to reinvent the offense, be more open, be multiple, all this kind of stuff. They brought in Matt Canada. That did not work. Surprise, surprise, surprise. And eventually they actually did the thing they had said they were going to do for a decade down there in Baton Rouge by bringing in Joe, who ended up winning the Broyles Award for the top assistant coach in college football. And he did help them turn things around. But man, Joe Burrow threw for 5,600 yards and 60 touchdowns, guys. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, we've seen what they've done. Like, Joe did not recruit those guys. He did not coach Joe Burrow at quarterback. He did not call the plays. But clearly he was someone who was rising through the ranks, was going to have an NFL future. And the Panthers went out there and hired him. And that first year, 4 guys went over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. Mike Davis did, Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson, now known as Robbie Chosen, and of course, DJ Moore. So the offense was solid that year. And you thought that, okay, with Sam, with CMC, DJ coming back, this could be a good offense. And under Joe that year, things did not go great as they had a negative 0.12 EPA per play when he was the OC. Now, Matt Rhule did him dirty by firing him on that Sunday after the bye week, blowing up my Sunday, by the way. Screw you, Matt Rhule, for doing that. And then Jeff Nixon took over, and things only got worse, as in those games, they had a negative 0.16 EPA per play. The next year, they went out there and got their rock star OC in Ben McAdoo, and things were better. A negative 0.06 EPA per play, but I'm sure that's not what it was early on in the season when the Panthers got off to, I believe, a 1-4 start before Matt Rhule was fired. So the OC situation was not good. We do know now that Joe Brady went on to be a quarterback coach in Buffalo, working with Josh Allen. They fired Ken Dorsey, the former Panthers OC, and he then went on to do good things with Josh Allen, and now is the head coach in Buffalo. I don't really know if Joe really is a good coach. Obviously, he's got to be a good coach. He wouldn't be, well, let's not put a blanket statement that everybody in the NFL is a good coach, but he probably wouldn't be in this spot if he wasn't. I just don't know how good he really is, considering he's got the alien Josh Allen playing quarterback for him. But Joe has obviously gone into bigger and better things, and Matt Rhule, he's not in the NFL. He'll never get an opportunity to be an NFL head coach. I think Joe Brady is going to have a future in the National Football League past his time in Buffalo if things don't work out for him as the head coach. So, yeah, coaching was clearly an issue. And I think maybe one of the biggest issues was that the organization was never truly committed to Sam. Think about it. They gave up a 2nd, 4th, and a 6th-round pick to go get him, something they did not have to do, in my opinion, because Zach Wilson was going to be the pick for the Jets. Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas, that was the new brain trust in New York, or Florham Park, New Jersey, where they're technically headquartered out of. They were not keeping Sam to be the starter. Maybe they would have kept Sam to be the backup. I just don't know how it was going to work out. Now, Sam is the kind of guy where he actually would have sat back and allowed that to happen, but they weren't going to do him dirty like that. They were going to let Sam go elsewhere. But the Panthers did not have to give up 3 picks. But once you did that, and this is how I felt back then, and even still feel now after seeing what played out, when you give up 3 picks, you exercise the 5th-year option, because when you're giving up 3 assets, you got to make a commitment past just 1 year. And I understand fans are saying, oh, well, it's only $4 million for his final year. Just let him play it out, and we'll figure out whether you want to give him an extension or franchise tag him. No, you gave up 3 picks. Be committed to more than just 1 year of this quarterback, that being Sam Darnold. And they did that. They exercised 5th-year option, giving him $18.8 million, and combining that with the other $4 million, it was $22 million across 2 seasons, guys. Not a ton of money, $11 million per year for Sam to be your starting quarterback. So the Panthers, they made, in my opinion, after doing the trade that I didn't like, they made the correct decision in exercising 5th-year option and committing financially at least to 2 years of Sam being their starting quarterback. The problem was they never were that committed to him being their quarterback, because in 2021, Sam got hurt, didn't play well. Things fell apart after that hot 3-0 start where you're feeling good about what Sam could be here in Carolina. And they decided after that year, okay, got to listen to the owner, who said you have to always be in constant pursuit of finding that franchise quarterback if you don't have him. And I suppose they believed after that year they didn't have him. And they were in on the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, even though the man's out there getting a massage and trying to get a happy ending. And if anyone's ever had a massage, you know he did it, because that's just something very easily you can avoid. They also attempted to trade for Baker Mayfield on draft night, and that didn't work out. They ended up getting Matt Corral, but said pretty quickly after that, yeah, he's not in for the competition. And we know Matt Corral is nowhere near the game of football nowadays, at least the professional level. And later on, they eventually did come to terms with the Browns and Baker Mayfield back in July, blowing up my day in Hilton Head. And they had a competition between Baker and between Sam. And we knew you try to get Deshaun, you try to get Baker, not once, but then you got him the second time. You didn't want Sam to be your starting quarterback. And Sam was out there with the twos in the preseason game and got hurt. And it was Baker's job. It was PJ's job. And eventually Sam did come back. And this really, to me, is the biggest what if when you look at Sam Darnold's time in Carolina. What if the Panthers would have truly been committed to 21 and 2022 being Sam Darnold's job as a starting quarterback? What if they just would have looked at 2021 saying, okay, you got injured, Cam came in late, things were a little wonky, let's just continue to develop the young guy we believed in enough to give up a second, fourth, and sixth round pick and to pick up $18.8 million of guaranteed money for. Why not just do that? But they decided they didn't want to. But had they done that, we did see that offseason, they tried to fix the offensive line. They brought in Austin Corbett, fresh off a Super Bowl in LA. They brought in Bradley Bozeman as well to be the starting center, and they drafted Ike Ekwonu in the first round. They had DJ Moore still on the roster. They had Christian McCaffrey still on the roster. And had he been the starter, he would not have been out there with the second team offensive line in that game against Buffalo to close out the preseason. We saw Matt Corral get killed by the third string offensive line the week prior in New England. So Sam would have been healthy. And when you look at when he finally came back weeks 12 through 18, when looking at quarterbacks, he was third in EPA per dropback per True Media. He was 13th in passer rating. His 44% passing success rate was the best of his career to that point. And if he would have qualified, it only would have been 24th among quarterbacks in the NFL, but he was playing good ball. The Panthers offensively were 7th in EPA per play. They were 9th in success rate, 13th in offensive points per game during that time, and they went 4-2. So things looked good when they finally got to Sam late in the final third of the season. So I can imagine, like, what if he would have started out that way? Now, let's not be revisionist here, because Matt Rhule obviously was a bad coach and never would have lasted here in Carolina, but there's always going to be a big what if they would have just gone with Sam. They still would have had a GM who made some bad trades and bad draft evaluations, still would have had a head coach who was in over his head, but maybe they would have had a quarterback. Maybe it would have worked out. But I guess considering the Rhule and Fitterer of it all, it's all a moot point. But that is the one thing when I look back at with Sam, what if they just would have been committed to him? Maybe things would have turned out differently. So reason number one why things not work out for Sam Darnold in Carolina, the Panthers were a bad organization. Reason number two, what was that? Well, sometimes you got to look in the mirror, and Sam Darnold certainly needed to do that when he was here in Carolina. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on the Locked On Panthers. Finding a doctor you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. Sure, you want someone who's in network nearby and has availability, but you also want a doctor who listens, makes you feel comfortable, and explains things clearly. That kind of doctor exists, and finding them as easy with ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love without all the hassle. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 150,000 providers across all 50 states, covering over 200 specialties from primary care and dentistry to dermatology and eye care. ZocDoc makes the process simple. You can search by specialty or symptoms and actually build a care team that works for you. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring this message. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your posts to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. According to Indeed data, Sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a higher than non-sponsored job. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. We didn't know it then, but it turned out that the Panthers weren't really a better landing spot for Sam Darnold than the Jets. The Jets remain bad. The Panthers, they have finally taken steps in the right direction, but the foundation here with Dave Canales and with Dan Morgan, Brant Tillis, and an owner who has taken a step back, figuratively and literally, that has now allowed for Bryce Young and the rest of this team to flourish enough to the point where they were able to back their way in, and hell, they earned it, to an 8-9 season and NFC division title. But a couple of years ago, back in 2021, with Rhule and Fitterer and the old version of David Tepper, that's still deep down, still inside of him. Yeah, it wasn't going to work out for really anybody unless, maybe Stafford would have worked out, but he spent a lot of time with a bad organization until they weren't in Detroit. And that's the thing. You're a bad organization until you've proven otherwise. And so far, the Panthers, they've turned themselves at least into a competent organization, but too little too late as far as Sam Darnold's career was in Carolina. But it's not just on the organization. It's also on the player. And I do think that organizations more often than not are to blame when players, especially quarterbacks, do not have success. Look at his time in New York. Darnold was pressured on 40.2% of his dropbacks. That was more than any quarterback across those 3 seasons in the NFL. And it wasn't like he was protected that much in 2021. But damn, guys, at some point in time, you can't just blame the ownership. You can't just blame the head coach. You can't just blame the coordinator. You got to look in the mirror and understand, okay, I'm not good enough. And that was the case for Sam in his 3 years in New York and his 2 years in Carolina, especially that first year. He was dreadful with the Jets. And the only thing to be excited about, in my opinion, when the Panthers traded for him was the fact that, okay, it's the Jets. They suck. They don't know what the hell they're doing when it comes to quarterbacks. They've proven that many times over the last decade plus. So, all right, you can chalk it up to that. He was taken in the top 3, and a lot of people thought Sam was maybe the best quarterback in that draft class. And the way things are panning out now, I guess he actually was. And also looking at it, the physical tools. Like, there was a lot to like about just him as a person, just his traits, his personality, a lot of it. But on the field, it was stinky in New York. And you look at his 3 seasons with the Jets, he ranked 41 out of 44 quarterbacks in EPA per dropback. He was 43rd in passer rating. He had 46 turnovers, which was the 5th most among quarterbacks during those 3 years. Only Jared Goff, Jameis Winston, Phillip Rivers, and Baker Mayfield had more. Now, Baker, things have worked out for him. Old man Rivers, I guess, boosted his Hall of Fame case this past year. Jameis Winston, hilarious, 30 for 30, never forget. Jared Goff has really turned things around. So we have seen multiple quarterbacks who turned the ball over a ton in 2018, 19, and 20 all turn out to be actually pretty damn good players later on in their careers. But during his first season in Carolina, he was near the bottom in a lot of statistical categories. 29th in passer rating, 30th in EPA per dropback. He was only ahead of Zach Wilson, his replacement in New York. He was 29th in success rate. He had 24 turnovers. That was tied for 6th most in the NFL that year. So a lot of the issues he had in New York were still the same issues he had in Carolina. And the thing, too, is, like, I brought up the stats at the end of 2022 when he finally came back and played in those final 5 or 6 games. While we did see him have the best stretch of his career at that point in time, in that de facto NFC South title game in Tampa, he had 3 turnovers. He had the pick. He had the fumble where, one of them, Ike Ekwonu, completely just got beat. And is it on Sam? I don't know. But you got to hold on to the football in this situation. So 3 turnovers really killed them that day in Tampa after they went up 14-0. And then the final game, he played as a Panther. He threw for 43 yards in that walk-off win against New Orleans. So he did not necessarily leave Carolina on a high note with the turnovers in Tampa, and then whatever the hell that was in that finale against the Saints in a game that didn't really matter, but could have been a game where, had Sam played really well, maybe the next coaching staff coming in, that being Frank Reich, oh boy, they probably weren't going to do it anyways. They had traded McCaffrey away. They were very clearly going to zero in on a quarterback. We didn't know it was going to be Bryce Young. We had an idea it could be him. So he probably was not going to get an opportunity anyways, but it did not end great. So Sam wasn't good, if we're all being honest with ourselves. And there was a whole bearded Darnold situation we were talking about in 2022. It's like, oh, hey, bearded Darnold, pretty good. And when they did lose some games late, like the Pittsburgh game, it wasn't Sam. I didn't think he played bad. Obviously, the offense was spectacular, the best it's ever been in franchise history. And that win against Detroit, I believe it was on New Year's Eve, where they ran all over the Lions. But Sam came in and was stable. He played his 111th. He just went out there and did his job. A lot of things that we're seeing right now in Seattle, he did then. Strong running game with Chuba and Deontay Foreman. Strong defense, making the right decision with the football, taking care of it. You can win with Sam Darnold. We saw that. But he had run out of time, and they had to move on. Had he played better the year prior, maybe he would have stuck around. But you got to look at it and say, it wasn't like Sam Darnold wasn't part of the problem, because he certainly was. So the organization, they were in a bad, bad place. Sam Darnold, he wasn't any good. And also injuries got in the way. We'll talk about that impact here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play-by-play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule. 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or quick lunches. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Why did Sam Darnold not work out in Carolina? Well, first off, I blame the organization. Matt Rhule, Scott Fitterer, David Tepper of old. Not a better spot for him to land than the New York Jets, who, of course, are the worst organization in the NFL, not named the Cleveland Browns. At least the Browns have stumbled into making the playoffs recently. The Jets, terrible. Also, Sam wasn't good. Wasn't good in New York. Wasn't good in Carolina until the very end, and just was a little bit too late for him to really get an opportunity to stick around. So it's not just those two things. It's also the injuries. You look at Sam, he was not healthy either one of those years. In 2021, he suffered an incomplete fracture of his right shoulder blade that caused him to miss 5 games in the middle of that season. He returned in week 16. And remember, when he left, it was Cam who came back to be the starter, and it was great in Arizona. It was fun as hell in Washington in that loss, and then it wasn't all that great. It was a fun 10 days. We can always go back and remember those times, but when he came back, that being Sam in week 16 against Tampa, Cam started, but Sam also came in and they were splitting reps, and it was just a nasty situation, as, of course, Panther fans will always and forever love Cam Newton, even though a lot of you didn't appreciate him enough when he was here. But yeah, that was not great to see. Then Cam was reduced to a red zone threat the last 2 weeks when Sam started on the road against New Orleans and against Tampa, showing the Panthers were at least a little bit more invested in him being their starting quarterback than they were Cam, and the fact that Sam had a contract, at least one more year left in his deal the next year, and Cam was going to be a free agent. That would make sense as well, but he was injured in 2021, so it did not help him out as well as far as his own injuries. 2022, as I mentioned earlier, once he lost quarterback competition, he was with the second team offense in that finale against Buffalo, and he was with the second team offensive line and he went out with a significant high ankle sprain and missed the first 9 weeks of the season being on IR. He was not active in a game until week 11, and that ended up being Baker Mayfield's last start against the Ravens. And after that, he took over. And as we mentioned early in the show, he played well in those games. So, man, maybe had he just gotten the opportunity, he would never gotten injured, but certainly injuries held him back. And it wasn't just Sam's injuries. You think about 2021, Sam looked good those first 3 weeks of the season, but then Christian McCaffrey got hurt against Houston on short rest in that Thursday night game. And McCaffrey was very vocal about his displeasure with playing on Thursday night. And this was a guy who was banged up all throughout 2020. And here we go again with yet another injury when that happened. The Panthers being 3-0, but you have your best offensive weapon on the sideline for whoever knows how long, or who knows how for however long it was, I forget, with the hamstring. So that happened. And you look at the time that Sam spent in Carolina, he only played 3 games with McCaffrey in 2021 and only 1 game, that game against New England, again with McCaffrey. So 4 games total in his career with CMC while they are both here in Carolina. It would not be until their time in San Francisco where they linked back up and Sam had that one start where they truly got to be teammates. Well, I guess on the field, not really, but yes, on the field they were, but only 4 games he played in Carolina with McCaffrey. And you look at the games when he had Christian McCaffrey, the 4 of them, he had a 63.6 completion percentage, 3 touchdowns of 4 interceptions, and a .02 EPA per dropback. The games without Christian, 56.0 completion percentage, 4 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and a negative .23 EPA per dropback. And those are games when Christian McCaffrey was, of course, still a Carolina Panther, but injured. And look at what he did his first 3 weeks as a Panther with CMC before he went down with an injury. Sam completed 68.2% of his passes, 3 touchdowns to 1 interception, and had a .23 EPA per dropback. So when he had Christian at the beginning of the year in 2021, things were great for Sam and for Christian. And the other game that he got him back, it was an awful game for Sam later on that season against the Pats because he was completely broken by that point in time in week 9. But weeks 1 through 3, confidence was high. Weeks 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, confidence got shattered. And we saw the result of that in week 9 when Christian finally came back. So had McCaffrey stayed healthy, maybe things work out differently for Sam Darnold. And you also have to look at the offensive line injuries. The Panthers started 13 different combinations in 17 games back in 2021. And their first 2 moves that year free agency were to get 2 of the lowest graded offensive linemen, according to Pro Football Focus, and Pat Elflein and Cam Irving. Those guys were a disaster, and they did not give Sam a chance at all. And, of course, they were not healthy. The Panthers spent the 7th fewest amount of money on their offensive line that season. Not great. So it's not just his injury. It's McCaffrey's injury. It's the offensive line injuries. It's Sam himself not living up to the billing as a 3rd overall pick. And it's the Panthers not being a great organization as to why things not work out for Sam. So we'll always sit back here and we'll wonder, did the Panthers, are they the ones to blame? I think large part they are. Is Sam to blame? I certainly think as well, but probably not as much as Carolina. It didn't work out. The Jets at the end of the day are the team that selected him out of the draft, and they thought he was the right guy, and they did not have the structure around him to have success. Carolina, they were taking a flyer, thinking this was going to work out for them. It didn't. He went to San Francisco, went to Minnesota, who their general manager didn't get fired explicitly because of the Sam situation, but it certainly did not help his case to remain. And now he's going to play for Super Bowl on Sunday. I've never really been a big Sam Darnold believer. Back when he was at USC, when he took over for Max Brown and saved Clay Helton's job and helped him get to the Rose Bowl against Penn State, like that was a hell of a game. And I'll never forget that throw he had. It was a post route, just an absolute rope. I think a 40-yard touchdown there at the Rose Bowl. And I was like, man, this kid's good. Then the next year, all the talk about him being a Heisman Trophy winner, number 1 overall pick, and SC did not make the playoff. He did not play well, was not a Heisman Trophy winner, turnover after turnover after turnover, and that was the case with the Jets as well. So, look, it's been a long road for Sam. I'm happy for the guy to make it here. I have friends here in Charlotte who were friends, or are friends still, with his fiance, and who knew them back when he was in Charlotte. Everything I've ever heard is he's a great guy. So genuinely am happy for him to get this opportunity. Wish it would have worked out in Carolina. Said from the beginning it wouldn't, but had these things play out the other way, And maybe we're talking about the Panthers having been a Super Bowl team at this point in time with Sam Darnold as their starting quarterback. But now he's in Seattle, which is also a great city. So, hell, hey, he kind of upgraded a lifestyle-wise. I love Charlotte, of course, but good for Sam. That's how I think it played out and why things did not work out. And now you look at Bryce Young, organization, far more stable. There's actually belief in the quarterback. Injuries haven't been anything, knock on wood. And look in the mirror, Bryce has been bad, but he's also improved. And the Panthers are finally in position where they can actually succeed with a high drafted quarterback. So that's me revisiting how things played out for Sam Darnold in Carolina and why he did not work out and why the Panthers did not work out for him during his time here in Carolina. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and over on Blue Sky at Julian Council. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And on Monday, we're not going to sit here and focus on the Super Bowl. We're going to look at the defense and continue our offseason previews, looking at each position and how the Panthers should address them this offseason. We're talking about the defensive line, the interior of the Panthers defensive line on Monday. All that and more coming up on Monday here on Locked On Panthers.